Okay, good afternoon. Before we start, I'd like to absolve my incredible staff and the entire team at CenterState CEO from the responsibility of trying to cram all of this material into one program. Those of you who know us know that we want the very best for this region. Sometimes that means that we push hard, that we work hard, and that we try to find the very best partners like PK from around the world who can help us achieve our economic objectives. That very same staff have done an incredible job today. Jana Miko, Krista Glazier, our communications and membership team. Please give them all a round of applause. Most importantly, my wife, Corinne, who's here with me. Thank you. You're my partner in everything that we do. I couldn't do this without you. So as you've heard, our theme today is about the need for revolution and continuous innovation, something that SUNY ESF President Quentin Wheeler actually got me thinking about at his inauguration last year. The challenges before us, he said, speaking about issues like climate change that threaten the survival of literally millions of species, are incredibly complicated. It stands to reason that effective solutions must be no less complex. And it's not just the complexity of these challenges, but also the sheer pace of change in our world today that's accelerating in a way that's forcing species, yes, but also we as individuals and our communities to adapt far more rapidly and intentionally than ever before. In many ways, today's meeting is a fitting moment to reflect on that evolutionary need, as it was just 5 years ago, almost to the day, that we launched CenterState CEO. Think back to the MDA and the Chamber of Commerce, two vital civic institutions with similar missions but different visions, tactics, and personalities. You might remember some of the tensions that existed between the two organizations, but perhaps less visible to you were the external pressures. The fact that across the country, chambers of commerce and business associations were facing challenges that called for change. Tightening corporate budgets, members with less time to engage, the growth of online competition for marketing, networking, and training, and the stark reality that in today's economy, even small businesses can be more dependent on a customer or a supplier on the other side of the world than they are on local needs. So when you launched CenterState CEO 5 years ago, you helped us drive three very important evolutionary adaptations. First, you challenged us to create a more efficient and effective organization with a unified vision for this region. And we have. We've reduced our overhead expenses, reinvested in new member programs, we've grown membership revenue, and our business and civic leadership have unified behind one voice and one vision for our region's economy. Second, in creating CenterState Corporation for Economic Opportunity, you helped us evolve our very thinking about economic development itself. Today, less than 1.9% of jobs in the average US metro area are created from the relocation of a firm into the region. Therefore, what we needed was a market-based transition to a more inclusive and human approach to growing our economy and improving our quality of life. One that focuses more on existing firms that are already here in our region, on our innovation economy, and our human capital assets. And the logic behind that evolution is at the heart of some of our most recent successes. Our downtown, once a source of blight and disinvestment, is now the fastest growing neighborhood in this entire region. Our entrepreneurial climate, left for dead a decade ago, is now anchored by the technology garden, a growing technology garden, home now to 70 companies and 175 employees, and attracting new partners like the first new venture capital fund in upstate New York in more than a decade. And our industrial sector, once a point of pride for our ability to develop and build products that the world depended on, and then more commonly known for the companies that we had lost and the ones that we held on to, is again emerging as a place that can manufacture what consumers want, produce the food they need to eat, and as you just heard from PK, develop the technologies that will shape their lives for decades into the future. Third, by creating CenterState CEO, you helped us acknowledge that our sense of place needed to evolve. 50 years ago, John Searles, then the president of the MDA, argued presciently that we needed to gain scale and redefine ourselves in relation to the world if we were going to remain competitive. And that meant working with partners across 5 counties. And while our sense of the region has evolved over the last 50 years, now embracing partnerships with the Mohawk Valley and the Southern Tier, the North Country, and parts of the Finger Lakes, I would argue that in many ways, it has not evolved fast enough. After all, in 1940, the city of Syracuse, the vibrant hub of our region's economy, was home to nearly 206,000 people, 41st in the country. And today, we are on the verge of losing our place in the top 300 cities in the world. Town, village, county, regional boundaries have social, cultural, and political value, but they are less economically relevant today than ever before. And in a way, they actually serve to focus our attention inward instead of where it belongs, on the world beyond our doorstep. Now, in the last few years, we've launched a Metro Export Initiative, established the Central New York International Business Alliance, and led trade missions to China, Singapore, and the ASEAN nations. But why? You've heard me say it before, 95% of the consumers in the world live outside of the United States. They represent 80% of the world's purchasing power and 92% of its economic growth. By 2030, China, India, and Brazil alone will make up more than 60% of the global middle class, while the US will represent 7%. These are just macroeconomic numbers, right? But the minute you set foot in a place like China, as I did last year, you realize these aren't just numbers. Picture 250 cranes in a city that didn't exist 5 years ago, each one building a building that is 50 or 60 stories high. Or the high-speed train I climbed on from Beijing to Shanghai, the 1,000 miles, the distance between Syracuse and Minneapolis. The trip took 5 hours, and they built that piece of infrastructure in 3 years. And then you see this, Shanghai, 1990 on the colonial side of the river looking out at Pudong. Fast forward 20 years, and they built Manhattan. Shanghai's a different place than Syracuse, I get that. But climbing back on a plane for a 14-hour ride home gives you plenty of time to reflect. To think about the angst-ridden community discussions that we're having here in our own backyard, and it dawns on you that the rest of the world is not waiting for us to get our act together. Think about our most recent and compelling civic accomplishments, our downtown and innovation ecosystem, the lake cleanup. For 20 years, these are things we have fought for and are rightfully proud of. But the biggest danger as we look to continue our economic reinvention is failing to recognize that we are not alone in our evolution. The history of the world is rife with species, companies, and civilizations that got too comfortable with their surroundings, existing in isolation and failing to notice that the ecosystem around them was changing. Our success is not a static thing, it's relative. And every day we spend fighting each other on the front page of the newspaper is a day that the world wins. Now, there are bright spots, lest you leave here with your head held low. Take Novelis. Known for decades as one of the largest manufacturers of sheet aluminum in the world. Then along comes plastic and other forms of cost and competitive pressures. And a company once synonymous with soda cans is forced to reinvent itself. Today, that very same company is the leading provider of automotive aluminum in the world, helping auto manufacturers like Ford meet new fuel economy standards and reminding those of us in Central New York the tremendous sense of pride that goes along with knowing that people all over the world and all over this country are driving that truck right there that was made in part right here in Central New York. Or Ephesus Technologies, a company that went from startup in the Syracuse Technology Garden to providing LED lighting to light the Super Bowl in 5 short years. Or Avion Flyterra, one of the companies that is testing new UAS platforms right here in this region. That's the future of aviation in this country and around the world, and this region has a remarkable role to play in that, as you just heard from PK. Now, these companies have figured out how to transcend an innate fear innate fear of change, to instead leverage what's happening around them to inform, guide, and lead them to growth. So what about the rest of us? The civic sector, the public sector. What lessons can we draw from these examples? Because the opportunities and challenges we have before us right now require our most creative, our most innovative, and our most collaborative thinking. Now, 5 years ago, we were very intentional when we chose a name for this organization, the Corporation for Economic Opportunity, CEO. Because promoting development and commerce alone were no longer sufficient to help us achieve our vision for this region. Issues of educational attainment, economic inequality, economic segregation, and poverty impact every single one of us. What's the future for a region where 35% of the people living in our city and countless others in our rural areas live in poverty? Or where sprawl creates an ever wider geographical divide between jobs and the people who need them? When jobs near the typical resident in a high poverty neighborhood have fallen by 17.9% in the last decade alone. And what's the future for a region where our residents are not prepared for the jobs that we have today, let alone the jobs that we aspire to create tomorrow? By 2018, 62% of the jobs in the state of New York are going to require some form of post-secondary education. Yes, we've had success with programs like Work Train, but it's simply not enough. Too many people in this region are falling farther behind, and it's fraying the social fabric of our communities and threatening our economic survival. Are we up to that challenge? Speaking of challenges, consensus, the Commission on Government Modernization, is tackling a highly complex issue. Let's start with the facts. Onondaga County's local governments include 1 county, 1 city, 19 towns, and 15 villages, with 36 distinct elected executives, 174 elected legislators, 195 planning board members, and 169 members of zoning boards of appeal. Together, more than the entire U.S. Congress combined, to serve a community with a population of 450,000. There's 17 different property tax assessment units in the county, 57 different fire departments, 36 public works departments, the smallest one responsible for maintaining 1 mile of road, and the largest one responsible for maintaining 794. Now, understandably, not all residents in Onondaga County are happy about this massive amount of fragmentation. He's almost 3. He's changing. It's okay. Kidding aside, we get it. It's a political issue. It's a social issue. It's rooted in our very sense of place. But consensus has also exposed what we should have known all along, that 69% of the residents in this county live in one community and work in another. We're not 36 distinct places. We're one interdependent community. And how we are organized can't just be about us. There is an entire world of pressure bearing down on us, and we have to adapt. Yet even as we embrace these opportunities, we have to remember that our ability to achieve our goals is not just about what choices we make, but sometimes how we make them. Our ability to work constructively together, even on the issues that divide us. To that point, Interstate 81. When all is said and done, we will invest more than $1 billion, and maybe far more than that, in a project that has the potential to unify and reimagine our city, to link our region's economic engines, and improve access, safety, and walkability. Yet we're debating this issue as if the economic future of the city of Syracuse and its suburbs are separate and distinct, when what we really need to do is to find points of commonality and compromise through open dialogue with people who genuinely see this issue differently, such that the decision, whatever that decision may be, supports our vision of a modern city and region capable of surviving into the 22nd century and not leaving us anchored firmly in the last for another 75 years. That has to change, because while we're taking 7 years to discuss and debate the narrowing of options from 18 to 2 or 3, which we will study inevitably for 2 more years before deciding on a timetable for construction that will inevitably take longer than that, we will have been lapped a dozen times over by people in communities with more vision, determination, and speed. While we're busy fighting with each other, the rest of the world is playing an entirely different game. Now, by a show of hands, who here in this room knows a company that's closed its doors in this region in the last 20 years? Who here has watched as a friend, a family member, or neighbor left this region because they couldn't find a job? The fundamental issue facing Central New York is our economy. It's what lies beneath the issues of decaying infrastructure and undergirds issues of poverty. This week, as Howard Zemsky explained, the state passed a budget that includes a $1.5 billion investment in the upstate economy. Now, in my lifetime as a resident upstate New Yorker, I cannot remember this kind of focus on upstate New York. So can we transcend our disagreements and rise to this opportunity? We have a built-in competitive advantage through our work with the Brookings Institution, and the Upstate Revitalization Initiative is an opportunity to turn that vision into reality. Imagine a corridor from Syracuse to Rome that is the very epicenter of technology development for unmanned aviation. An inland port that gives Central New York a direct infrastructure connection to the global economy, making it cheaper for manufacturers and agricultural producers alike to get their products to customers around the world. An innovation or arts and cultural district linking University Hill to downtown. Investments in transit and broadband to better connect city to suburbs and people to jobs. We have a remarkable opportunity in front of us today, but we also have to understand that any strategy that we put forward has to recognize both the urban and rural character of our region and has to state clearly and with intentionality that we are not a place that plans to leave entire parts of our city or our region, nor populations like our veterans or minorities behind. As Quentin Wheeler said, this is a century of tipping points. Central New York is at a critical juncture, but this moment demands action at a pace and scale that we have not yet mastered. And when you helped form CenterState CEO 5 years ago, you did so to create a vehicle for our business and civic leaders to advance a unified vision for our community. But the message that is heard the loudest is the one that's carried by the most voices. Together, we have crafted that vision, and now we need your voice. Join us in the conversation about poverty in this region. Insert yourself into the discussion about 81. Demand a more responsive and effective and efficient local government through the consensus process. There are debates to be had and there are choices to make, but the world around us is not waiting, and neither can we. So let's start by sending New York State a thoughtful and innovative plan to invest $500 million in our economy and put Central New York back to work. Thank you all very much for coming today.